Welcome to Red Flags, the podcast where we spot the green flags, wave the red ones, and occasionally get lost in the footnotes. I'm Yelena, your resident audiobook addict, and joining me is my co-host Sam, a true book reader extraordinaire.
Hey, hey, hey.
Sam, welcome to our very first podcast episode. How are we feeling today?
Super excited. We've been talking about doing this, I would say, for maybe the better part of the last 12 months, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm so glad that we finally got the show on the road. And what better way to get started than to talk about all things romance?
Ooh, exciting.
Indeed, indeed. It's funny you mention that because I've been guilty of undervaluing romance novels in the past. I've kind of favored what you would call, for want of a better word, your highbrow lit.
Yeah.
But I've really changed my perspective on this. And romance novels are having a bit of a renaissance at the moment.
Really?
Yeah. So today's podcast pick is going to be Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. And Emily actually spoke about this renaissance during an episode of Bookmarked, which is Reese Witherspoon's podcast. And I'll leave a link down in the show notes below. And in her perspective, the rise in popularity for romance fiction at the moment is because there is a need for human connection at a time when we are all so disconnected.
Yeah, okay.
And that got me thinking about our origin story and why we wanted to start a podcast in the first place.
Yep, and it's definitely an interesting origin story. So for our listeners, we've been working on this for quite a long time.
Yes.
It's just because it's a passion project at this point for us.
Yes.
But I got to give our listeners the context as to why Red Flags was born and some history they really need to know specifically about me is that I'm not a literature person. I don't normally read that much. I don't get into the analysis of the books. And my main consumption of any form of literature up until probably about a year ago was manga.
Yes.
And that's not me saying manga or comic books aren't literature.
Correct.
It's just me saying, and like it demonstrates that I consumed one thing only for
Very
most
niche.
of my life. Yeah, very, very niche. Until Fourth Wing came out.
Ah, yes.
Because everyone was losing their minds. You read it, my partner read it, everyone on the internet's been reading it. It's all over BookTok. And then my partner was telling me, you love dragons, you love fantasy, so why not just read the book? And I'm like, sure. Except reading takes me forever because my brain does this thing where I need a voice for every single character and I need to hyper-visualize everything, which maybe makes sense as to why I read manga mostly.
Fair enough.
So instead of torturing myself with reading the book, I got an Audible subscription.
Yes.
And then I specifically grabbed the graphic audio of Fourth Wing, which has a full cast of voice actors. It has music and everything that works. And I absolutely loved it. It was amazing. I have a full-blown obsession with audiobooks now because I really appreciate where they've come from, how they developed. You know, years ago, they used to just be really basic and kind of boring. And these days, they're just a really cool new way of consuming the medium. So I got hooked. And then suddenly I'm wandering around, walking my dog, sending you these chaotic voice notes of like every plot twist and like every opinion that I've ever had on a character. And it got really interesting when you started replying to me. So we realized at some point that we are both having two complete different experiences to the same story. You know, you're the lifelong literature buff who notices structure and craft, and I'm essentially the newbie just vibing with whatever emotional punch the book throws at me.
Yes.
And we were both discovering these differences, not only because of our reading history, but also because of the way we consumed the book. You read it, and I listened to the audio. So it got us into just some really in-depth, nice conversations. And you just started forwarding my voice notes to friends who'd read the book as well.
Well, because you had really interesting takes, right? I don't think you need to be a well-seasoned reader to have a unique and nuanced perspective on something.
Yeah. But somewhere in between all that chaos of us sending these voice messages, and maybe even it was an idea from someone else, we decided, let's make a podcast.
Yes.
And overall, you would think this shouldn't work. Two co-hosts on different ends of the spectrum, consuming literature differently, wouldn't gel together. But somehow it does for us. I think we work really well together. And maybe that's because we grew up together and we bonded over manga.
I think so. I think so. That's lovely. And you know what? At the end of the day, that's what this podcast is all about, right? For me, at its core, it's a way to connect with each other and with a broader community of readers and to talk about the literature that we found interesting and share ideas with each other.
Yeah. For me, it expands my literature knowledge greatly, which is amazing for me at my age now. I'm finally expanding my horizons and I'm finding a lot of things very interesting. And I love your takes on everything, and I always have since I've known you. And originally for this podcast, we were thinking about just making it romance or maybe even slightly smutty, which, hey, we still love all of that stuff.
Oh, yes.
But it became more interesting to not limit ourselves because there's an endless world of literature out there in many different forms, many different places we can get it. And I think we have such a unique situation going on that just makes the conversation really fun that we both get to discover this all together.
Yeah, I agree. And on the smut part, really, what I found was I, much like you, enjoyed reading it. But as you said, I think the part that I really enjoy about books and about literature more broadly is the ability to kind of think about the concepts and the symbols and the ideas. And there are only so many different ways that you can spread a person before you kind of run out of things to talk about.
Yeah. And if it's good spreading or bad spreading.
Yeah, correct.
I 100% agree. But I am glad that we started this off with a romance still anyway.
Agree, because at the end of the day, actually, Emily Henry, back on this podcast with Reese Witherspoon, she said it best, I think. She said, I don't think there's anything more human or more powerful than love. So what better way to kick off a podcast series?
I mean, I agree with that. I think every single manga we read as teenagers probably had some love trope in there, and that's what we were into. And maybe that's why we work well together.
I think so. So let's talk about red flags and how it works.
Yes.
Red flags is spelled R-E-A-D. And as the name suggests, we want to pick up on things that are tackled well or were enjoyable, so our green flags. Explore what didn't work so well, the amber or red flags, and hopefully have a few funny conversations along the way.
Yeah, and we do have a couple criteria that we're using for each episode to determine our flag rating system. And we then award points each separately to these criteria. And then it's averaged as an overall score between both of us. So that way, not one of our opinions is just taking over the other.
Correct.
And this rating is out of 5. And essentially, if you're on the lower end of the rating, you're closer to a red flag. And if you're at the higher end of the rating, green flag.
Yep. Pretty straightforward.
Yep. And would you like to introduce the 4 criteria that we've got?
Yes, please. So our very first criteria is plot strength. Is the plot convincing and is the payoff worth it?
Yeah.
Our second criteria is character design and development. Are the characters lovable? Are they well defined? Do they grow and drive the plot along? Do I care about what happens to them? Criteria 3 are themes, tropes, and plot devices. How are they used and are they used well? And lastly, chemistry. Now, this is relatively self-explanatory, but I want to be clear, this isn't necessarily just romantic chemistry. But relationships more broadly. How do characters interact with each other? How do they interact with the world around them?
And then for a bonus, and this is just for funsies for us, because our podcast is called Red Flags. So we do have to have a red flag category. Now, this doesn't have any points, but this is just the stuff for you and I that personally gives us the ick, maybe makes us cringe, just something that's personal to us about the book that would be our personal red flag.
Yeah, and a bit of an homage back to the podcast title. Hey?
Exactly.
So, shall we introduce today's book pick?
Please do.
Well, at just 34 years old, Emily Henry is the romance writer of our generation. She's written 10 novels, sold over 2.4 million copies, and all 5 of her adult romance books have been optioned for an on-screen adaptation.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, actually one of them, People We Meet on Vacation, is set to come out in January 2026.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that's
really
soon.
Very soon. She has also won the Goodreads Choice Award for Romance 4 years in a row. And this book, Great Big Beautiful Life, scored 4.2 out of 5 on Amazon, 4 out of 5 on Goodreads, and 4.5 out of 5 on Audible.
Wow, high ratings.
Yes, and it was also Reese's book club pick, which is, of course, why she was on the podcast. Emily Henry books are typically considered your sort of light romance beach reads, and this one is as well. But I do think it's important just before we dive into a summary to make sure I caveat with any trigger warnings.
Yeah.
This book does delve into some serious topics: dementia, terminal illness, mental illness, car accidents, and we will be referring to sex and sexual themes. So if any of those things are topics or concepts that you don't feel particularly comfortable listening to, then time to hit pause and hopefully you'll come back and listen to us again.
Yeah.
All right, Yelena, over to you. Give me a 2-second summary of the book.
Okay. Before I do that, just want to say that spoilers are ahead. So if you also don't want spoilers for this book, you might want to stop listening now because we're spoiling the whole book.
But come back when you've read it.
Yes. My 2-second summary is this book is about 2 journalists who are competing for a once-in-a-lifetime story. And of course, because they breathe the same air as each other, they fall in love.
Oh, yep, that is pretty accurate.
Yeah, I think so.
Tell me about the book itself.
Okay, yeah. So in all seriousness, no, we've got our main protagonist, who is Alice Scott. She is a journalist from Los Angeles who writes celebrity pieces, fluff pieces, essentially, according to this. But she's keen to write something a bit more substantial and make a name for herself. So she hunts down the whereabouts of Margaret Ives, an heiress and tabloid figure who's just retreated from public life like decades ago. No one knows where she is.
Yeah, so Margaret now lives a reclusive life in Little Crescent Island, and Alice tracks her down to try to persuade Margaret to let Alice write her biography. But Margaret then sets up a competition between Alice and Hayden Anderson, a more accomplished Pulitzer Prize-winning author, to spend 1 month on the island to interview her and to compete for the opportunity to draft her full biography. And that's the setup, right? Alice and Hayden are competitors. They're working under certain constraints. So Margaret, for example, puts in place a non-disclosure agreement between them where they're not allowed to talk to each other about what they learn during the interviews. And they're trying to win the trust of this really reclusive, really private woman who has secrets in her past.
Yeah. And during this trial month, Alice and Hayden conduct their interviews with Margaret. They each get different pieces of like her life story, which they're not allowed to share their notes on, so they don't know what each other have been told. But slowly they do begin to suspect that Margaret is withholding truths or manipulating what she reveals.
Yeah, and Alice and Hayden also interact more with each other, perhaps in part because they are the only 2 young people, at least that we hear of, on the island. And initially, they set boundaries with each other at Hayden's request. And these boundaries are to avoid spending time with each other and then becoming close to each other, only to then live with the knowledge that one of them would be picked for a life-changing opportunity over the other. And Hayden's motivation for trying to put this boundary is because he's had a particularly bad breakup where he and a former partner were competing for the same job.
Yeah.
He won the job over the partner and the relationship then broke down.
Yeah, correct. And of course, that's not what happens. Alice and Hayden spend time with each other. They share meals with each other. They flirt with each other. They make out. Everything happens. They don't have sex for most of it until right at the end of the book.
Well, they don't have penetrative sex, which I think is going to be important to cover off.
Correct. Yes. And we'll talk about that a bit more later. But during all this, we also get to learn a bit more about Alice's family. You know, she has a close relationship with her father. He unfortunately passed away. A much more complicated one with her mother, who in Alice's opinion doesn't seem to care about her job, which is a little bit odd since her mum has done the same job as her, just not in celebrity.
They're both journalists.
Yeah, correct. And she has this massive guilt and fear and panic over her sister's illness, which comes up in the book too. But there's also another character that comes into this, Theo, who is a co-worker of hers, and a bit of a situationship is what we're going to call it, because he's not really interested in her unless it's convenient to him.
Yeah. And meanwhile, Margaret's great, big, beautiful life unfurls in a series of interviews that we have with Alice. And as a reader, we begin to learn about family tensions. We learn about the price of fame, her sister, so Margaret's sister Laura's tragic ending, and Margaret's romance and marriage to a rock star called Cosmo Sinclair.
Yeah. And then we frequently cut back in the story to Alice and Hayden, who cannot and do not avoid spending time together at all. You know, Hayden even meets her mum, stays at her place for a couple of days. He opens up about, you know, his feelings to her, fears and doubts, and eventually they do the dirty.
Yes. And at the climax of the novel, Alice puts together a series of clues and she figures out that Hayden is actually Margaret's grandson.
Yeah.
And that Margaret orchestrated this competition as an attempt to try to bring Hayden closer together to her. And Alice is absolutely devastated. She demands that Margaret at least be honest with Hayden and tell him about his history and his relationship to her. But Margaret refuses because by this stage, she now feels that Hayden is too distant with her.
Yeah, weird.
Which is a bit strange. And Margaret tries to counter-offer Alice with a partial memoir, given all of the work that Alice has done. But Alice rejects that.
Yeah. And of course, Hayden doesn't know any of this has happened. He arrives at Alice's house with like champagne in hand, ready to celebrate. However, during all this, it's also revealed that Hayden had pulled out of the competition early, even before Alice did her pitch. He never did his pitch to Margaret, which does upset Alice because she's like, do I not deserve this? Do you think I couldn't handle this? And on top of that, with the struggles of not being able to tell him because of the NDA about his actual relationship to Margaret, it gets her really flustered and scared and angry, overwhelmed, whatever you want to call it. And she decides to break it off with him without question. And she goes back to live with her mum for a while.
Yeah. And look, I actually didn't mind this last kind of denouement of the story.
Yeah.
Alice and her mum spend time together over the next few weeks. They work in her garden. They cook together. They listen to her late father's albums or favorite albums. And they reconcile their differences with each other. Alice also writes a letter to Margaret, urging Margaret to tell Hayden the truth.
Yeah.
And she never hears back from Margaret. But 5 weeks later, Hayden appears at the door, revealing that Margaret had sent him Alice's letter and had told him everything.
Yes. And then we end the story. They confess their love to each other. They decide to build a life together. We find out as readers that they end up co-writing the biography. They build a home together, have a lovely daughter, and they name their daughter after Margaret's sister, Laura.
Yeah, what a beautiful, great big beautiful life, hey?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, but let's get into the nitty-gritty of it all.
Yes, the analysis, the interesting stuff. Why don't we start with characters and their relationships?
Okay.
Because Emily, in that interview with Reese, she said that she loves using a romance to take two characters with flaws, put them together, have those flaws chafe against each other, and then the only way that those two people can be together is if they kind of work through their individual issues.
Yeah.
So we kind of see a little bit of a setup here between Hayden and Alice in that respect, right? Hayden is your sort of grumpy to Alice's sunshine trope.
Yeah.
How do you feel like that dynamic actually played out in the book, though?
I don't think it worked at all. And it's mainly because, sure, Hayden maybe at the very beginning is a little bit grumpy, but he's more standoffish towards Alice because they're in a competition together.
Yeah.
It's not that they actually dislike each other in any sort of
Or
way.
aren't attracted to each other.
Exactly. And Alice is, of course, her happy, bubbly, giddy sort of self. But he immediately 180s.
Yeah.
Like nearly straight away to helping her, to liking her, to not being the grumpy character that he is portrayed or said to be at all.
And that complete 180 in his personality happens, to your point, quite early on in the book. And that undercuts the trope quite a bit, I think.
Yeah.
It makes him come across as almost quite two-dimensional as a character. But this isn't the only example of where we see kind of character inconsistencies play out, right?
No, it's not. Yeah.
The other example that comes to my mind is Margaret and Margaret Ives. Now, she doesn't tell Hayden about his relationship to her.
Yes.
Which is not quite in character with everything that the reader hears about her over the course of this very, very big book.
Yeah.
She's described as being a very strong, hard-headed, headstrong woman. So her fear about not telling Hayden or telling him and him not receiving it well is quite strange.
It is.
Doesn't align to the story. And particularly because when she's young, we're taught a lot about the dichotomy between her and her sister. Her sister was the soft one. Her sister was the sweet one, the one who couldn't adapt to being famous. Right?
Yeah.
But Margaret was supposed to be the wild child. She's fiery. She took no prisoners. It's hard to imagine that kind of character suddenly being too afraid to talk to Hayden. It's understandable, but we as readers lack any kind of event or foreshadowing to suggest that this would be in line with her character. At best, we get smatterings about a curse that haunts the family, but even that feels a bit like an excuse. Like maybe it's meant to be an excuse, but there, again, isn't any closure about the curse and what it is and how to break it, right?
Yeah, and at the end of it, she was the one that brought Hayden there, and the end goal was to tell him. So when she doesn't want to tell him, you go, why?
Yeah. And then arbitrarily, it seems, tells him at the very end in the last chapter of the book.
Yes.
Only for us to be able to end the story with an epilogue of how they co-write the biography together.
Yes.
It feels like an almost artificial disagreement between her and Alice that is just not in keeping with her character.
Yeah.
And look, there are other tropes that the book starts to present. There's also the idea of enemies to lovers.
Yes.
Which is another relationship paradigm that we should talk about.
Yep.
And again, I think I understand that conceptually. It can be done really, really well, right? The idea of love and hate being such a fine line between each other, two sides of the same coin. And the setup in this book is here. You have two people who are competing to win an opportunity to work with this incredibly famous author. But why does it fail?
Yeah, I think it's because we can't really call it an enemies to lovers. If, you're the only young people on the island at all, and they're not actually enemies to begin with. Their romance happens so soon and just so repeatedly throughout the book, and they are just generally quite nice to each other and enjoy each other's company. There's no actual thing other than they're in a competition together that pushes them to be enemies.
Yeah. And I guess this trope only really works if they are genuinely not interested in each other at the start. And there's a kind of an undercurrent of anger or dislike or frustration. But to your point, where was the enemies stage in the enemies to lovers paradigm here?
There wasn't anything because they didn't know each other. So something that I thought maybe would have been better is she knew of him as a writer. He's a Pulitzer winner.
Pulitzer Prize?
Yeah, however you say that. But so she knows who he is, and you could have had something where she admired him, looked up to him as a journalist, and then he was a complete asshole.
Yeah, yeah.
Or she could have hated him for his success because her career is lacking, and then there's them
jealous with him.
Yeah, and then they're competing together. Or even you could have brought in more of her own insecurities and self-doubt about her own abilities, just in some sort of way that would have caused tension between her and Hayden, just to build a platform for Hayden to then shift from being, grumpy and an enemy and not liking her into something that's just more to what they'd be together as like an enemies to lovers trope. There just wasn't anything to build off of.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to your point, I think essentially they're just strangers who happen to be attracted to each other, right?
Yeah.
The competition is the only basis for there being enemies.
Yeah.
And so that means there's no tension there. There's no hatred there.
No.
There's no kind of undercurrent of frustration. There's nothing. And it's also a bit strange because, it's not that uncommon for people to find themselves in a situation where they're, say, attracted to people that they work with, or one person might get a promotion of the other.
Yeah.
So again, this feels like a bit of a rubbery construct.
Yes, it does.
It's actually quite disappointing because this book I personally found quite difficult to consume since I was already an Emily Henry fan.
Yeah.
Right? And Emily Henry, in my personal opinion, she's known for clever writing, for immersive stories. You learn so much about characters through the minutiae about them and in their lives, right? So she has a book, for example, called Book Lovers, which I don't think you've read.
No, I haven't read anything by Emily Henry.
Yeah. Okay, well, you've not read Book Lovers. I'll give you kind of a really quick synopsis of it. But Book Lovers tries to invert the paradigm of your sort of traditional cliche romance stories where you've got the fun, bubbly girl who moves to a country town and then falls in love with a guy who owns a Christmas tree farm.
Okay, yeah.
And instead you have this sarcastic, type A, highly strung, super assertive, ambitious female lead. And Emily Henry creates this fantastic little cozy town, but also a very legitimate excuse for this assertive, sexy, smart, highly strong, ambitious female lead to go to that cozy town with her sister. And then she bumps into a person that she already knew and she already disliked from her professional life, right?
So what I was suggesting
Correct,
before.
that exact idea. And it works really, really well, in my opinion at least. But I think the challenge here is we don't really have much of depth to these characters.
Yeah.
And we don't really have a very coherent reason or basis for either their enemies to lovers trope or even them to be grumpy to sunshine trope either.
Yeah, and it's just interesting because I don't know anything about Emily Henry's writing other than this book. And so when you described her to me, like it sounded like it would be a really well-structured book. And I consumed this differently to you.
Yeah.
So I listened to the audio and we've discovered over time that audios kind of give you a bit of a different perspective on the book because originally you told me I would hate this, which is hilarious. And I was like, great, let's do it for our very first book.
Great idea.
But I didn't immediately hate it. And I think it's because I consumed it as an audiobook. Because when you are, someone's talking into your ear and you don't have to really be actively reading certain things. So it's still going to continue. And I do think and I'll give the narrator like a shout out, Julia Whelan. I think she actually did a very good job as like an audiobook narrator. She did narrate for all the characters. So she was Hayden as well. And I don't think in any audiobook circumstance where a woman is doing a man's voice or a man is doing a woman's voice, it is ever great.
Yeah, yeah.
Unfortunately, there's always going to be something slightly jarring about it. But she did a fantastic job for what she was doing, which maybe is why also the book is really highly rated on Audible. But there were certain things that I picked up on because I listened to the audio about her writing that you didn't. So my first part of it was he said, she said, I said writing. So there was chunks in like paragraphs where the only descriptor for when one of them was saying a sentence afterwards would be like he said, she said, I said. To lacked a lot of nuance, synonyms. It just meant there was like no actual cues for the emotions that anyone was feeling.
Right. So there was nothing like he replied, he retorted, she stammered.
And it happens all in like one chunk, which is what threw me off because as an audio listener, I have the multiple voices going. So I know it's Hayden speaking or it's Alice speaking.
Right. So you don't need to know he versus she.
So as soon as you've got Hayden speaking, he said, Alice said something, I said. And it was really, really jarring for me. And you didn't pick up on that when you read it.
I would have skimmed right through that.
Yeah, which I can't skim because I'm listening to the audiobook.
And tell me if you disagree with me on this, but you're relying a lot on tone in an audiobook, right? To try to give you a sense of pace and to figure out what's happening.
Yes, very much correctly so. And this is why I think the narrator is very, very important when they're doing audiobooks because some can really butcher it and some can sell it more than it needs to be sold. And I do think this narrator did a very good job at selling this book and performed it really well. But I am relying on it. And I assume when narrators are doing things, they take different takes for different tones and contexts and they choose what they want the listener to hear overall, what the author wanted the listener to hear. But it just also led to me picking up on other things that you didn't pick up on or maybe skimmed over in your head when you read it. So another thing that bothered me about the writing is when every time a character would go outside, it was just listed that it's hot outside and I'm going to put sunscreen on and wear my protection. And then again, the next day it's hot outside. And I went, oh, I get it. Like we've set the scene, but we don't need to do it every single day unless it's suddenly become winter. But it doesn't. They're in a sunny place. It's great weather. It's hot. And so there was a lot of over describing things.
And repeated descriptors.
Yeah, very repetitive and just, it was over-describing, but also not
telling you that much.
Yeah, not in a great way either. Near the end of the book, there's this one scene, and I replayed it for you today, which, because again, you didn't realize it happened, but she's like, I woke up and, was being very quiet to not wake up Hayden. And so I go and turn on the coffee machine. And while that's brewing, I drink my water, and then I now drink my coffee, and I go to the front door to put my stuff at the front door so it's there for when I leave. And then I go put my shirt on and tie up my shoes. A lot of
irrelevant minutiae that doesn't tell you anything about this person or their personality.
And I think maybe listening to it, it just ended up being significantly worse.
Yeah. So that's really interesting, because you have here a pretty good audiobook narrator who effectively couldn't cut through the fact that the writing didn't give her much to work on.
Yeah, correct.
Felt like it was kind of lagging and boring and a bit repetitive.
Unfortunately. But at the end of the day, when I finished the book, I didn't pick up on it as much. It wasn't like, oh, I hated this. I didn't think I hated the book. But I think that's also because I just got to listen to it and it was just subconsciously all being consumed.
Right.
Whereas for you, when you were reading it, you have to actively read every single word. And if something you struggle with, makes it harder for you to read, or if there's things you've already told me, sometimes when you're bored with something, you just kind of skip.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would contest that it's a bit harder if you're an audiobook reader, because if I'm a physical book reader, I'm just going to skip past the parts that I don't care about and get straight into business, right?
Yeah.
But you don't have that luxury. So you are going to have to listen to her put her shoes on and fill her water bottle and drink her coffee and then put her sunscreen on and then go out the door again. So it just doesn't really add much to create pace or tension in the book.
No, it doesn't, unfortunately.
Well, this is actually probably a good time to talk about story structure and plot development, and a good segue, I think, to talk about the other component of this book, which is that it tries to be a non-linear literary fiction, almost like a multi-generational saga.
Yeah.
And look, I'll be blunt, I couldn't keep up with it.
I couldn't either.
I had to keep looking at the family tree. And frankly, I started to skim through most of it. It didn't feel like it lended itself well to the story or had any relevance to the story.
No.
Which is a real shame, because this kind of multi-generational saga can be executed well. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is a book that was recently written by Taylor Jenkins Reid.
Yeah.
And that was an excellent example of an interwoven narrative between characters where each segment felt impactful. But here, I think it was particularly jarring to follow, because we're constantly shifting perspective, we're shifting time period, we're also shifting genre. So we alternate between a love story and a romance and a kind of meet cute between Alice and Hayden, right through to this much more somber, deeper, more nuanced type of literary fiction and analysis.
Yes.
And I respect her, right? I respect her for wanting to try something different, to dip her toes into a more complex, multi-generational story. But in my opinion, this should have just been two different books.
I think it should have as well. And listening to the audio, it became very, very confusing as to who was who, what was happening, because I thought it was going to be more like a mystery where you're getting the little pieces together and at the same time I would be working out what's happening.
Yeah.
But it was so confusing because we were split up between the romance and the family history that went back 4 generations, I think. And that wasn't in a timelined order either, that I just couldn't keep up, to the point where we have a family tree stuck to a whiteboard right now in front of us to try and keep track. And we've looked at it and gone, who was that character and where were they in it? I don't remember.
Yeah, and I think this is the part that I find quite disheartening, because it feels like these other characters were just almost convenient plot points that were shoehorned in there to try to force a coherent narrative. And at the risk of being quite harsh, I feel like her editor could have culled half of those stories.
We could have had a quarter of the content we didn't need to have all the details about everything. Really, at the end of the day, there's a couple plot points that needed to come through, and that's it. And we could have just left it at that.
Yeah.
Or, as you said, completely different book.
Yeah, correct. And there are a lot of examples of, I guess, underdeveloped plot points.
Yeah.
Which is really disappointing. And I think it's because we had such a huge book and so many different things to cover that we start several threads that we then just abandon halfway through the story.
Yes, yeah. And I have one of those. So this is what I'm going to call its weak content because it had the potential to go somewhere and you expect it to go somewhere and then it doesn't really. So Alice has a sister and her name's Audrey. She's the younger sister, I believe. And she's portrayed to have like heart problems, a potential illness. And Alice has a moment in the book where she brings Hayden a cup of green tea and he doesn't pick it up from his doorstep because she leaves it at his doorstep each time. And she has this panic attack and thinks he's maybe dead inside his hotel room, which this is quite early on in the book of them knowing each other. And you're sort of like, oh, okay, she's having a big freak out. There must be something really, really traumatic that's happened. And I thought her sister was dead for a lot of this book. But turns out her sister is completely recovered and she now works with the Peace Corps.
So you just spent a good chunk of the book wondering what pivotal traumatic event in Alice's childhood is going to lead her to overreact like this.
Yes.
If her sister is dead or deeply unwell, why she has, like, whether she has any guilt there and why. And you have the opportunity to explore a concept or a character trait in depth. But then you just get a cursory reference and the thread is abandoned in the second half of the book.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting because then the second half of the story shifts to her relationship with her mother. And again, if I was to summarize the conflict between Alice and her mum, as you mentioned earlier in our book summary, is that it boils down to the fact that Alice thinks that her mum doesn't take her work very seriously, that she thinks it to be quite frivolous.
Yeah.
And again, you know, like this actually has potential as a plot point. It's a very relatable story where you might feel like your parents who've excelled in a particular field look down at you because you've chosen something more mediocre. But there really doesn't seem to be a strong evidence base for this in the book. Alice just kind of thinks this for some reason and then we have to accept it. It's very tell, not show.
Which I think happens a lot in this book where we get a lot from Alice's perspective, but we never get any like truth or actual experience with a different character to go, oh, that's why she actually feels like this. Like there's some truth behind it, or if it's just all in Alice's head.
And that's, I think, a fault is perhaps a bit too harsh, but it is one of the consequences of picking a first-person narrator.
Yeah. That
you are only ever going to have a very limited perspective, or most times will only have a limited perspective. But there are still, I think, clever ways to be able to shoehorn that more effectively in the story.
Yeah.
Other than a cursory reference that we pick up halfway through the book.
Yes. Yeah.
So I want to talk about another, I guess, trope that I found really, or theme that I found really frustrating.
Yeah.
And for me, this was the one about penetrative sex.
Yes, let's talk about this.
I think it's really strange that Alice and Hayden, they engage in a lot of amorous activities, right?
Yep.
But neither of them see it as, quote, real sex, which they can't come back from.
Yes.
And penetrative sex is kind of presented as this ultimate goal that represents the start of a serious relationship that they can't go back from, where everything else before it kind of falls short of that.
Yeah, which is, in real life, at least to me, is not true because they've gone through, and I'm going to call it they've done, so that you've got like a 1% to like 100%.
Yeah.
Their 100% for them is penetrative sex.
Yeah.
However, they've done everything in between and they've like starting to like build this friendship, relationship, whatever you want to call it. And the idea that them finally having penetrative sex would be the thing that makes the whole situation get worse. If one of them wins the competition, just doesn't make sense at all. They've already gone to like 95%.
Yeah.
You may as well go to the full 100. At this point, you guys are already feeling each other up, making out.
Yeah.
He's met her mum.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, there's so much that's already happened. You go, I don't understand why penetrative sex is the like ultimate goal.
Yeah, like this is still going to hurt when you to break up if you two break up.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It feels like a strange kind of puritanical, almost conservative undercurrent.
Yeah.
And I think it's also a bit disappointing because it potentially casts aspersions over things like same-sex relationships where you're not going to have penetrative sex, but there are still other ways in which the relationship is as close
Yeah,
as
of course.
another type of heteronormative couple, for example.
Yeah.
But even let's just play the game for a second, right?
Okay.
Like, let's assume that the moment that they can't walk away from is the moment that he sticks it in her, right?
Yep.
The penetrative sex is paramount.
Yep.
Then at the very least, there should be a really good build-up to that, right?
Yeah. And God, is there not a good build-up? I'm sorry, but I read mostly romance and smut.
Yeah.
And there's, good romance and smut, and there's bad romance and smut. And this just felt like not a lot happened, to be honest. Like, there wasn't anything in this that did a build-up that made me feel something.
Yeah,
for
okay.
them. Like, their sexual chemistry and tension just felt flimsy. And once they would start doing something, you would read the next line. And then immediately they've 180'd and they've stopped. And you sort of go, wait, what happened? Did they just suddenly stop having sex or doing sexual things? And my example for this is the beach scene. So Hayden and Alice are on the beach.
Yep.
They're alone.
Yep.
And Hayden is guiding Alice's own hand down on herself.
Yep.
While he's also groping her as well.
Fondling her.
Yeah, fondling her. And so they're doing, some sexual things.
Things are getting hot and heavy.
Exactly. And it just hard stops. It's just that you read the next line and he's finished.
He's gotten up.
He's like, nope, we shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
But there's and it could be because they're trying to build up some good tension, or maybe it's supposed to be edging and you're trying to achieve something. But that doesn't come through. And it feels more like a weird break in character, or even just like in the story as you're reading it. Because I'd feel like maybe Hayden needs some sort of arc of struggling to not want to touch her. Yeah, just something that feels like there's an emotion attached to what they're doing, rather than it's just the act and being like, no, we shouldn't do this because it's going to ruin.
It's going to take things too far.
Yeah, exactly. So this just instead maybe to me feels like, which segues into our next sort of topic is a plot of convenience, because they have their moment on the beach, it stops, which leads to Hayden somehow being invited to meet her mother.
Yeah.
And then from there, Hayden and Alice fight.
Yeah.
And after that fight and tension happens, a storm comes, and then they eventually get to their 100%,
Their 100%.
which is penetrative sex.
So I want to start at the outset by making sure that you and I are on the same page about the definition of a convenient plot point, right?
Yeah.
A plot of convenience. And in my mind, it's a storytelling device where an event or an object or a skill or a piece of information appears suddenly and implausibly in the narrative just to help the protagonist or the storyline advance.
Yep.
And when this convenient plot point is super over the top and it solves a seemingly unsolvable problem or insurmountable problem, we call it a deus ex machina.
Oh, that's where that comes from.
Yeah. And I want to geek out here for a second.
Go for it.
Deus ex machina is a Latin phrase, and it translates to God from the machine. And that's because in ancient Greek theater, actors who were playing gods were brought onto the stage using a machine. And that machine could either be a crane, or I think it's pronounced a mechan, used to lower the actor from above, or it could be a riser that brought them up from through a trapdoor. Now, there are a lot of examples of deus ex machinas scattered across literature and media. There are a couple of common ones that I'm not going to contest whether they're actually implausible or not. But one that comes to mind, for example, is in Lord of the Rings. Again, spoiler alert, that at the end of Lord of the Rings, Sam and Frodo are carried out of Mordor because of these giant flying eagles that swoop down to save them when Mount Doom is exploding and there's lava everywhere.
Yeah.
And it is the only reason they survive that blast.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Or another example that I mean, I personally think could be a deus ex machina are the time turners in the third Harry Potter book, to the point where I think it's interesting that we destroy all the time turners in the fifth book of Harry Potter, because otherwise you've created something that could be used to finish the story without it needing to be.
And fix everything. Yes, yeah, okay. Which is exactly what's happening in the current Marvel stuff with the Avengers universe, because we've got a whole multiverse of timelines and they are doing absolutely everything and anything they want to do with it, and it can solve any problem. You can bring back any character. Anyone can be anyone.
Interesting you mentioned that, because I'm pretty sure when I was doing research on a deus ex machina, I came across a quote from is it the Russo brothers?
Yeah, I think so.
Who did Marvel. They spoke about having created a deus ex machina, I believe is it Captain Marvel?
Yeah.
And the fact that she could only be brought in at the end of the story, because otherwise she would be too powerful.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, and it's convenient that most of them aren't ever around when only one of them is fighting in their own movie, because they're doing something else or they're somewhere else and they can't help. Because I think for Captain Marvel, she's supposed to be helping in the whole universe, so she can't always just be helping Earth, and that's why it's like, oh, she can't just be here to help us in our time of need.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
And similarly, exactly as you say, multiverse then becomes the only way to kind of go back from a seemingly unsolvable problem, which is, Thanos and the hand.
Yeah, oh gosh, I can't remember what it's called now. The Infinity Stones.
Infinity Stones.
But I think, there's a bunch of times in any kind of movies they write themselves into corners. And sometimes that's because they don't think the franchise is going to continue.
Yeah.
And then they realize the franchise is continuing, or like an actor's gotten too old for how long, a franchise is going for, and they're not supposed to look like they're getting old. That happens a lot with teenagers. Yeah. And so they have to write in something that's going to make it work for whatever scenario is happening.
And, plot conveniences can be a bit controversial. It's generally considered to be, for want of a better word, poor writing.
Yeah.
But to your point, there are occasions when it's quite excusable, right? And you just need to move the story along or explain a particular situation for whatever reason. I think what I struggle with this book is that there are way too many plot conveniences and they don't serve any meaningful purpose. But more importantly, they could easily have been replaced with something that would have been more cogent and more in line with the story.
Yeah, correct. To me, it feels like it's a plot convenience goes into another plot convenience that goes into another one. Like it just keeps sort of going into the next one, so it doesn't feel like a whole overall story has been built. And I'm going to tell you about my biggest gripe in this book, and you know what it is.
Oh, I know what it is.
I'm going to set this scene for everyone who's listening. So we've got the storm scene. So a storm is coming. Alice's phone dies. She drives home. No one can contact her. Hayden thinks she could be in trouble, so he comes to her bungalow in the storm to make sure she's okay. And then they finally get their 100%. So they're penetrative sex. And this is unrealistic to me for multiple reasons. As well as to me feels like it has a continuity error. So this is a line from the book. Should get to us tomorrow, and it's not a hurricane yet. And then another line, and this is Margaret saying it. We got a guy coming to cover the windows and everything tomorrow. So the storm's coming the next day as Alice leaves Margaret's house. And that's the assumption. But then suddenly, maybe an hour later, it hits. And in my head, I can only imagine that Alice is driving maybe half an hour from Margaret's house in this small town. She can't be going far every single day, but it's enough that the storm is already hitting as she goes to get her groceries and goes like to the bungalow that, okay, how did the storm suddenly go from it's coming tomorrow to it's happening right now and it's very dangerous? So that to me is either very convenient or just a continuity error.
Or, it could be that Margaret misinterpreted or misjudged how far away the storm was.
True.
But that's not the only reason why you dislike the scene.
No. So my second point is that Alice is a smart, meticulous character. We've learned this throughout this whole book. She's very good. She found Margaret Ives out of everything. And her phone dies. It has not died once in this book. She's a journalist who uses her phone as a backup recording device along with her normal recording device every single day that she has interviewed Margaret and been with her, and it has never died once.
Yeah.
And maybe that's because she has a power bank or she plugs it into her car as she drives. Something, because she's a journalist who is waiting for that phone call.
Yes.
So I can't believe that she would let her phone die, or at least not notice that her phone had died.
Yeah, yeah.
And so for the whole ride home, as she goes to the grocery store, she doesn't think about checking her phone, pulling her phone out. The storms come. Maybe she wants to check on Hayden.
A weather alert?
Yeah, check the weather to see what's happening, or check on Hayden. Or even if Margaret said the next day they're fixing up the house for the storm, maybe call Margaret and go, hey, are you okay? Because the storm has clearly hit. So I just don't believe she wouldn't grab her phone out at all. And then once she's home, she's like, oh, my phone's dead. And she goes to plug it in. And of course, the power goes out straight away.
Yes.
That's when the power cuts out. So her option is, oh, I'm going to get my laptop and I will message people. And her laptop has full power.
Yeah, okay.
Unfortunately, her laptop tethers to the internet on her phone. So she's like, I can't possibly use this.
Yeah, okay.
Unless she plugged her phone into her laptop to charge it.
I actually didn't pick that up.
There's just so many reasons as to why the phone thing doesn't work. And this just could have been done a different way. Her phone could have been left at Margaret's house, and maybe she doesn't realize until she's driven too far and the storm's hit and she can't go back.
Yeah.
Or maybe the cell towers are out, or I don't know, she drops it and it physically breaks. Just something that isn't it died and then I don't have a good reason for why it died or why I can't get it to charge in this circumstance. And it ended up leading again to the plot of convenience of then, of course, no one can contact her. So Hayden gets really worried and treks through the storm to her house to make sure she's okay.
And it's meant to be romantic, right? He drove his car in the storm. He risked life and limb to finally get laid, right?
Yeah, essentially.
But there are more realistic ways to create the tension.
100%.
And this just didn't feel like it was it.
No, it didn't. And I still don't know maybe what the idea is of him coming through the storm. Maybe it's the knight in shining armor thing. But in reality, if he was coming through the storm and she wasn't there, what was he going to do? Maybe that's too much of a realistic view on that one. And maybe...
Got to suspend some disbelief.
Exactly.
But there's probably a bit too much here.
Yeah. Just to push them into the next plot point, essentially.
Yeah.
There is one other plot of convenience that I want to bring up, and it's our character Theo.
Okay.
The photographer situationship. I'm not even sure why he's in the book, because he gets introduced really early on just from Alice's point of view. And he's the type of character that only ever wants her to come to him.
Yeah.
And she's already done her arc where she's like, nope, I'm standing up for myself. If he wants to, see me, he has to come to me. So we've already had that arc of hers go, and then he comes to meet her, or he's supposed to meet her later on in the book, and then he doesn't show up.
Yeah.
He rings her an hour late being like, I'm 3 hours away.
Yeah.
And so they don't meet up. And I think it's supposed to maybe bring in some sort of Hayden then can swoop in and show her that he's a better man or something, or not like that. But it just felt very lackluster, and I didn't think it needed to be there.
So we're saying that the Theo conflict was already resolved.
Yeah.
And then we kind of resurrected it just to try to create a contrast or a character foil to Hayden.
Yes. Or at least I think that's what maybe was supposed to happen.
Interesting. See, I was going to contest you at the start and say that, if the purpose was for Theo to be a foil to Hayden, then it is effective, right? Because ultimately we, via Alice, learn that Hayden is a much kinder person who actually cares about her. But I do agree that it's not ideal that this is a character that we pretty much only hear about, and we never hear from him, or we rarely hear from him. And the majority of the issues are already resolved before we reach the point of him being a good character contrast.
Yeah, because I think this could have been done in a different way. You could still have Theo, and Alice maybe could have grown as a character. So she's so happy, sunshiny.
Happy-go-lucky.
Yeah, happy-go-lucky, where maybe that's why she wants to always like go to him, like it's to do something for Theo. And maybe in this she could have built something where maybe she's not as needy, not as sunshiny, and built like an arc in a slight opposite direction.
Right.
Or we could have introduced Theo as a much worse character. And if Hayden had the better background for being the actual grumpy character and them actually being enemies, if that was set in stone, you could essentially have two characters that don't seem great. But underneath it all, as you start peeling like the layers off of Hayden, you start to see even under all that, he still respects Alice.
Right.
You know, has something there that goes, okay, he at least respects her even if they don't like each other.
That's really interesting. So it kind of takes us in a full circle back to our concerns about Hayden as a character.
Yeah.
Because he was not fleshed out in, I think, a really detailed and nuanced way as being the enemy or being the grumpy character. It isn't really an effective foil to use Theo to contrast him because we don't get the setup where we get to say, oh, look, here are two people who mistreat Alice, but one is just using her for his convenience.
Yeah,
but
she's there.
Yeah. Whereas the other genuinely deeply cares about her underneath a gruff exterior or a facade that he's performing to protect himself.
Yeah,
right?
correct.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Hey, look, I think it's probably time for us to start rating the book. We've spoken at good length, I think.
I think so too, yeah.
The good, the bad, and the ugly. So, Yelena, do you want to give us a quick recap about the rating system and how it works?
Yes. So we've got 4 different categories that we will rate on. Plot strength, character design and development, themes, tropes, plot devices, and chemistry. Each of those can have up to 5 points from each of us. And then at the end of it, we average it all out, and that's our overall score for the book.
Great. Let's get straight into it. Plot strength. How strong is the story?
So I gave it a 2, but I'm wondering what you gave it as well.
I also gave it a 2. I think we might be on the same page as to why. From my perspective, I come back to the fact that this book needed a good edit, or it should have been 2 different books.
Yeah.
It was too difficult to follow and it was too jarring to change, not just perspective, but also genre.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very hard to follow.
What about character design and development?
So I gave this a 1.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's very, very low. And I wasn't expecting it to be this low until we analysed the book. But if we're talking about did I love the characters? Did I care about what happened to them? No, I really didn't. They were just kind of there for me, and I didn't have any sort of emotional attachment to them or what they were doing at all.
Yeah, and I think this one's challenging, and I'm trying to kind of rack my brains to think about how Emily Henry has done this in the past. But I remember, just to go back to Book Lovers, I quite liked the side characters in Book Lovers too. I felt like they had a little bit of dimension, especially the main character's sister.
Yeah.
Whereas here I feel like the sister is just kind of spoken about and doesn't really have much of a personality.
No.
The mother, Jodie, whom I know we didn't get much chance to speak about, but is Laura, Margaret's sister's daughter.
Yeah.
None of these characters feel like they were particularly well fleshed out, and compounding that, our main characters felt a bit two-dimensional too. I'd probably give it a 2.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. What would you rate the themes, tropes, and plot devices?
I rate them a 2. I have a soft spot for Grumpy Sunshine. I know it wasn't the best execution of the trope, but I liked it. And I liked her avenue of trying to get 2 characters, or, her preference to try to get 2 characters to work on their own problems individually in order to be better as a couple.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I gave it a 2 as well because I don't think every, trope or plot device was done absolutely horribly or anything. I just think there was a lot of places that we could have improved, which maybe would have come from if we had just the romance side of things as a full book. Then you have time to actually expand on everything.
Yeah.
So I give it a 2 as well.
Chemistry. Now, we can talk here about the characters' interactions with each other, but I think we've covered that pretty well.
Yeah.
What about the smut?
So I know I'm going to get maybe some hate for what I rate this. I give it a 0.
I didn't even think you could rate something as a 0.
It's our rating system. We can give it a 0.
All right. Well, okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty harsh.
Yes.
I thought I was the harsh one.
Yeah. So look, I mean, I do come from the background of reading a lot of smut and like romance stuff. And so for me, chemistry is a lot more specifically to me about the romance and how they are together and how it's building and if their characters match what's happening. And overall, if it's just awkward or if it's hot. So if you're going to put the smut in there, it's got to be
execute
good.
It well.
Exactly. And I just don't think it was executed. It's not like it was executed like, oh, that was just terrible smut when it happened, which it wasn't great. But there was no good build up throughout the whole book. I felt nothing for this. And coming into this book going, it is a romance.
Yeah.
Even with the other half of the book not being a romance, I have some sort of expectation for it and I didn't get anything from it from what I normally read a romance to. So I gave it a 0. What did you give it?
Well, I feel like a better person now because I was walking in here expecting to have been the harsh one.
Okay.
And I think for me it's just really hard because I love her other books.
Yeah.
I think A Funny Story might be my favorite.
Okay.
And the chemistry between Miles, I think that the way they describe the main character, he's just so incredibly well, I guess, created and nuanced.
Yeah.
That I'm sorry, Hayden, but I know Miles. And I gave him a 1.
Okay. Yeah.
That's
That's fair. That's fair.
Where does that total us to?
So that totals us to a 1.5 out of 5 rating, which
That's harsh.
It is harsh. It's very harsh for our first review.
Yeah.
And for an author that you quite enjoy.
What I would be really interested is to come back to this story or this particular novel after we have reviewed maybe 20 or 30 other books.
Yeah.
Because then with the passage of time, do we soften our stance?
True, maybe.
Or when we contrast this book with other books, do we look at Emily Henry more favorably?
Maybe. Like when I came into this, you did, and I've already said this, you said I would hate it because of the type of books that I read. And when I listened to it, I didn't hate it off the bat. I was like, it's a book. I don't hate it. I've listened to much worse. I've listened to some very bad writing. But it's once we started actually analyzing it and getting into the nitty-gritty of it is where I went, oh, I don't actually like these characters or feel anything for them. I don't feel anything for this book. And for most of it, I was confused.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't do much for me. And then the rating became quite harsh.
Yeah. I guess for me, in summary, the book was just like a tall glass of lukewarm water.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Prefer it to be a bit more cold.
Which,
or a bit hotter.
Maybe in future I'll read another Emily Henry book and we'll see if I have the complete opposite reaction and whether I have the same feelings as you as to whether I absolutely love it. Or maybe just not my style of book, which can happen. Like, exactly. But I'd like to get into what our red flags are. So as I said at the beginning, these are our personal cringe factors in a book, our personal red flags. If there are any, there might not be any, but did you have anything that just made you go, ugh, in this book?
As in like audibly groan or
just
give you the ick?
Exactly, yeah.
I don't think anything gave me the ick. I just didn't care about it.
Yeah, okay.
So for me, again, it's like a tall glass of lukewarm water. I would prefer it to be hotter. I prefer it to be colder, but this is fine.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
But from your expression, I'm guessing that you did have some red flags.
I did, and they're so left field. It's not what you would expect.
Yeah.
So the knees. Let's talk about the knees. So as a repeated thing, it gets described that both Alice and Hayden are really tall. And whenever they sit down together, their knees knock to the point where there's a scene and they're described as trying to get into one of the booths. And they have to like configure themselves and his knee is in her crotch.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm thinking about this going, I need tall people to tell me whether this is real and take a photo and show me if this is real. Because it just doesn't make sense to me that the reason they don't fit together is because they're both tall people. It was just really weird, and it got mentioned so many times. I just went, what are we trying to get at? And then it doesn't lead anywhere.
Yeah.
And then there was one other. Again, this is just me being me and
petty.
Yeah, I know, it's just
Harsh.
me. It's like if I was in this situation, I would be mortified. This is where my icks come from, because I'm like, what's happening? But so Alice starts picking him up croissants and green tea.
This is Hayden. She picks Hayden up croissants.
Yes, correct. And leaves them at his doorstep. And so early on, she gets him a hot green tea, and she gets herself a coffee. She sits at the cafe for half an hour doing work on her laptop, and then proceeds to take him the green tea and leave it at his doorstep for whenever he's going to pick it up when he gets back to the hotel. And part of me is like, I don't understand why you didn't get the green tea as you left.
Oh, yeah, as a takeaway order.
Yeah, instead of waiting with it for like half an hour.
Yeah.
And then also leaving just anything at his doorstep when you don't know when he's going to be back and he doesn't know who you are is also just weird.
Oh, cool, because she does do this at the very start of the relationship.
She does. Yeah. And then eventually she's like, why didn't you pick up the green tea and croissant? And he's like, because I didn't know where it came from. It could have been poisoned for all he knew. So it's the things that give me like anxiety in life, and I thought it was weird. Okay, so Sam, I have an idea that I'd like to start a segment where I cast actors to the characters. So I pre-prepped something to pitch to you.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. And for any of the listeners there, I'm just going to do a couple of the characters, but I do have a full list. And if you ever want to hear all of them, you can find those on our socials. So Alice Scott.
Yeah.
I think should be Zooey Deschanel. And if you don't know who she is.
New Girl.
Yes, correct.
Yes.
I think she does the sunshiny, bubbly thing very well. And I think she would make a great Alice.
Yeah. The smart, bright, positive person who just rocks polka dots, but that doesn't mean she's not tough and strong.
Exactly. Basically who she is in New Girl, essentially. It's very close. And then for Hayden Anderson, I was thinking Adam Driver, who's Kylo Ren from Star Wars.
Yeah, okay.
Now, hear me out. He's tall, and they mentioned the tall thing. But also, Hayden at the beginning of the book gets described as not really conventionally attractive. That gets lost throughout the rest of the book. But, and I'm not saying Adam Driver isn't attractive, but I don't think he is conventionally attractive like some other actors. And
Henry Cavill's or the like.
Exactly. And I think he would like make a really good moody, broody role if you really got into like that kind of character and would just kind of make sense. I reckon he'd have a real good mopey face. And then finally for Margaret Ives, I was thinking Judi Dench.
Judi Dench?
Yes. So, if anyone doesn't know, as time goes by, James Bond, I think just for like her age and that, she'd probably pull off a really good standoffish kind of character.
She does pull off a certain kind of stoic, graceful, regal character, which Margaret also exudes, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I think she could portray her really well.
How exciting. That's really lovely. Thank you for sharing that.
That's okay.
And thank you to our listeners for joining us for the very first inaugural episode of the Red Flags podcast. If you made it all the way to the end, then we can't thank you enough for your support. And we hope that you loved our very first episode as much as we loved making it.
And if you've got a book you'd like us to tackle next, or even just any of your thoughts on Great Big Beautiful Life, drop us a comment and we'd love to hear from you.
You can find Red Flags anywhere where you listen to your podcasts. Follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Red Flags. That's red as in READ.
See you next time.